Just 1 minute ago, the royal household shook as Carole Middleton, mother to the future queen, stood face to face with Queen Camilla and uttered the words no one expected. "My daughter is Britain's real queen." What led to this rare and volatile confrontation? And why now? The monarchy's carefully veiled tension has just erupted, and there's no going back. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The confrontation wasn't scheduled, announced, or leaked in advance. It was precise, unscripted, and unforgettable. Just after noon, Carole Middleton was spotted being ushered into Clarence's house under a strict no-media protocol, bypassing the usual reception areas and brought straight to a private room where Queen Camilla was reportedly reviewing press briefings. According to high-level palace sources, the meeting had not been arranged through royal channels. It was demanded. Camilla's aides were caught off guard, and the queen consort herself was, for the first time in years, blindsided. Those present described the room's atmosphere as brittle, like glass about to shatter. But Carole didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The fire was in her words. The moment was captured by internal palace security footage, now sealed within the royal archives. But the dialogue has already spread like wildfire among senior staff. Carole, standing firm, delivered a line that reportedly stunned everyone in the room: "You're queen by default. She's queen by devotion." It wasn't a political jab, it was a maternal reckoning. It came after months of silence, after watching her daughter wither under the weight of ceremonial perfection and institutional abandonment. The remark wasn't meant for the press. It was aimed straight at Camilla's legacy. Staff nearby, sworn to silence but unable to hide their disbelief, described the encounter as furious but composed. Carole didn't storm in or lash out. She arrived with the calm rage of a mother who had watched her child suffer behind a gilded mask for far too long. Camilla, ever the strategist, reportedly remained seated for most of the exchange, choosing to observe rather than react. But even she couldn't dismiss the tremor in the palace that followed. The confrontation wasn't a spectacle, it was a warning. The Middleton-Camilla divide had existed in whispers for years, but Catherine's recent withdrawal from public life had changed everything. Carole's presence in Clarence's house that day wasn't just about reclaiming her daughter's dignity, it was about challenging the narrative being pushed behind closed doors. It was about unmasking the hierarchy that crowned Camilla, while emotionally dismantling Catherine. In that room, it was no longer about titles. It was about truth. The staff didn't know how to respond. A royal protocol advisor reportedly asked for security to be placed on alert, not for protection, but because something bigger is coming. Carole's words have since echoed in meetings, calls, and hushed corners of the palace. And though no official statement has been released, there's one truth that can't be denied. Something has fractured within the royal structure, and the cause was not scandal, but a mother's unrelenting love. But this confrontation was not impulsive, it was the culmination of years of betrayal, power shifts, and Catherine's quiet suffering behind palace gates. While Camilla held the crown, Catherine carried the burden. Behind public smiles and carefully staged moments, Catherine had become the heart of the monarchy without the title. But the pressure was building. And when the crown began to crush her spirit, her mother watched in silence. Until now. From walkabouts flooded with flowers to front-page covers proclaiming her the future of the firm, Catherine's rise in public adoration had once seemed unstoppable. She was polished, gracious, poised, hailed as the modern face of royalty in an aging institution. Polls showed record-breaking favorability. Her every gesture was dissected with admiration. To the world, she was already a queen. But what the public didn't see was the emotional toll of playing the part without ever being handed the script. Behind the palace gates, Catherine's influence was curiously absent from decisions that mattered. She was asked to appear but rarely invited to speak. And while Camilla stepped further into the spotlight, carving a throne next to Charles, Catherine was slowly, invisibly pushed toward the edge. Those closest to her began to notice a shift. The woman, once energized by causes, communities, and children's laughter, had begun to move like someone running on instinct alone. Her smile, though still radiant, didn't quite reach her eyes. She had perfected the performance, but lost the joy. Meetings were missed. Projects postponed. Her voice, once bold behind closed doors, grew quieter with each passing month. And in her silence, Camilla rose. Camilla's ascent was not loud or dramatic. It was subtle, almost surgical. Through quiet counsel with Charles and firm control over select advisors, she gradually became the voice in the room when decisions were made. Events Catherine once led were quietly reassigned. Invitations to state dinners arrived without her name. Even family gatherings, where once she had sat beside William at the center, found her moved further down the table physically and symbolically. Sources say Catherine wasn't even consulted in discussions surrounding certain ceremonial roles for the coming year. One aide allegedly remarked, "The Queen Consort's reach now exceeds her title." And the Princess of Wales? She's been made ornamental. Carole Middleton saw it happening. She watched her daughter retreat, layer by layer, shedding light for survival. At first, she said nothing. She trusted that Catherine's role would be protected, that William would intervene, that the institution wouldn't risk losing its greatest emotional asset. But when the calls became shorter, the visits more strained, Carole began to sense something irreversible was unfolding. Friends say Carole once remarked, "They're removing her from the story she helped write." And then, months ago, she whispered a line that now hangs heavy in the hearts of those who love Catherine: "She's being erased while wearing perfection." It was no longer just about favorability or duty. It was about survival. Catherine had become a symbol too adored to discard, but too powerful to fully embrace. And that contradiction became her prison. But Carole was not willing to watch the dismantling continue unchecked. She saw the subtle exclusions, the rewritten narratives, the loss of agency disguised as honor. And as any mother would, she began to gather the quiet evidence of a daughter being faded out of her own legacy. And while Catherine suffered in silence, Carole began collecting whispers, every snub, every slight, every moment her daughter was made invisible. Camilla never needed the people, she needed the system. Over time, she carved out a place that once seemed impossible. But in doing so, did she silently orchestrate Catherine's sidelining? Some say it wasn't coincidence. It was a quiet coup. In the aftermath of Queen Elizabeth II's passing, the royal stage was suddenly, dramatically altered. The throne had changed hands, but so had the power behind it. Charles ascended. Yes, but it was Camilla who swiftly became the central voice in every room that mattered. Through carefully curated acts of soft power, she made herself indispensable. Not loud, not public, but persistent. A kind of influence that didn't flash, only functioned. Staff noticed the shift. One by one, senior courtiers who had long aligned with William began finding new loyalty under the Charles-Camilla axis. There were whispers that even longtime aides who had once shielded Catherine were now rerouted, reassigned, or replaced. The tone within the palace changed, and it did so subtly, deliberately. Behind the scenes, moves that once required consensus were being executed with quiet finality. Camilla's presence at key advisory sessions grew more regular. Her input on royal engagements became standard. And with each passing week, decisions involving Catherine became curiously convoluted. Events once led by the Princess of Wales were quietly postponed, reshuffled, or attributed elsewhere. Press teams were instructed to diversify representation in palace communications, a phrase that in practice meant less focus on Catherine and more room for Camilla. Even her wardrobe, a symbol of presence and power, was rumored to have been subjected to unexpected last-minute protocol revisions. Designers once working with Catherine were now redirected. Outfits coordinated for appearances were shelved without explanation. And then came the meetings. Private, powerful, and purposefully unpublicized. Sessions where strategies were drawn, appearances were curated, and key royal messaging was refined without Catherine present. She wasn't unavailable. She simply wasn't asked. One aide, speaking on condition of anonymity, delivered a line that rippled like thunder through the whisper corridors of the palace: "The Queen Consort gets what she wants now." It wasn't said with bitterness. It was said with resignation. The firm had shifted, and those who didn't adjust were quietly faded. Carole Middleton saw the pattern like tracking the slow pull of a tide. From the outside, the family still smiled. The photographs still charmed. But beneath it all, The machinery was humming in a different direction. Catherine was no longer central. She was symbolic. Decorative. Respected. Yes. But used. Carole began keeping track not of headlines, but of absences. Moments Catherine should have been celebrated, and wasn't. Invitations lost. Appearances clipped. Camilla's name rising in palace briefings while Catherine's was increasingly relegated to sentimental praise with no weight. And slowly, a quiet fury began to grow. But a mother's silence doesn't mean surrender, and when Carole decided to strike, she brought secrets Camilla never saw coming. Buried at the bottom of a box meant for donation, Carole Middleton stumbled upon a diary she hadn't seen before. It wasn't just ink on paper, it was Catherine's inner world, and it held truths the monarchy never wanted revealed. It happened on an otherwise ordinary morning. Carole had been organizing belongings, preparing to send boxes to a local charity, when she opened one marked with Catherine's name. Inside were old clothes, a few photo albums, and tucked between folded sweaters one slim, leather-bound book. Unmarked. Unassuming. But the moment she opened the first page, Carole understood this wasn't a journal. It was a lifeline written in quiet desperation. Each entry poured out with carefully guarded emotion, penned in Catherine's steady but vulnerable handwriting. It was the voice she'd never allowed the world to hear. And as Carole read on, she realized the heartbreak wasn't new, it had been building for years. The entries spanned months, some short, others sprawling. They spoke of sleepless nights, an unshakable feeling of being watched, and the emotional toll of perfection. One line read, "They say I represent calm, but inside I'm trembling." Another, "I serve the crown, but it doesn't see me." Carole's hands shook as she turned the pages. The diary didn't tell a story of royal glamour. It laid bare the emotional erosion of a woman trapped between obligation and erasure. Catherine's words repeatedly returned to one name, Camilla. Not in bitterness, but with weary clarity. "She speaks for Charles. I'm told to smile." Another entry recounted a moment when Catherine prepared a speech for a child welfare event, only to be told hours before that Camilla would be reading it instead. "I wasn't even asked, just replaced." The diary revealed not rivalry, but resignation. And that resignation to Carole was more terrifying than rage. What struck her most wasn't just the professional pain, but the personal fracture. Catherine wrote of moments when George had asked why she didn't speak during certain ceremonies, when Charlotte noticed her absence from family photos, when Louis clung to her scarf and wouldn't let go. "They see more than I want them to," she wrote, "and I don't know how to shield them when I'm being told how to stand, how to look, how to disappear." Carole sat in silence for hours after reading it. The pages left her raw, her maternal instinct in flames. This wasn't palace protocol gone awry. This was emotional abandonment disguised as tradition. And worst of all, no one seemed to care. The diary had been forgotten, discarded among things meant to be given away. That, too, was a metaphor. Her daughter's voice had been boxed up and nearly lost. There was never a question of turning it over to palace officials. Carole didn't trust what would be done with it or how it would be spun. This wasn't about scandal. It was about truth. And protecting the dignity that had been stripped away so subtly, so expertly, over time. This was the moment Carole's silence died. Because once you read your daughter's pain in her own handwriting, you don't wait for permission to act. This was no longer about public image. It was about protecting her daughter and reclaiming the dignity stripped away in silence. Before Carole confronted Camilla, she prepared not as a desperate mother, but as a calculated strategist. Sources say the Middletons held private meetings to protect Catherine and force the palace to acknowledge what they had buried. Carole Middleton had always been the quiet force behind her daughter's ascent. But when she uncovered the full extent of Catherine's erasure, something changed. She no longer sought peace, she sought accountability. And she knew that to win against the invisible machinery of monarchy, she couldn't come armed with emotion alone. She needed a strategy. Away from the cameras and curated statements, the Middletons began meeting in private, not just as a family, but as tacticians. Legal minds were quietly consulted, off the record and without William's knowledge. The goal wasn't scandal. It was survival. How far could they push without collapse? How much could they reveal without burning the entire house down? Through trusted intermediaries, Carole reached out to former aides who had once served Catherine loyally, but had been edged out or reassigned during Camilla's rise. They came not with bitterness, but with buried truths. Stories of briefings rewritten, emails mysteriously vanished, and staff loyalty silently coerced. This wasn't about proving a conspiracy, it was about building a case of character. Carole wasn't trying to destroy Camilla. She was trying to remind the public who Catherine truly was, and how much had been taken from her in silence. The phrase Queen of the People was floated as an internal concept, not a title. A narrative, one based not on bloodline, but on sacrifice. Carole and her allies began shaping an image of Catherine as the woman who had served, smiled, and stood with dignity, even as she was slowly pushed from power. The press, long hungry for anything unsanctioned, received quiet nudges. Not stories, questions. Why hadn't Catherine spoken recently? Why were her events being scaled down? Was she truly resting, or was she being removed? The public didn't need full answers. They needed doubt. And Carole was ready to provide it carefully, surgically. The response was louder than expected. Articles started to shift tone. Headlines began framing Catherine not as absent, but as unseen. Social media erupted with commentary, not just from monarchists but from mothers, daughters, and women who recognized the quiet erosion of a strong woman in a powerful space. Carole didn't gloat. She observed. Because this wasn't about viral attention. It was about leverage. And with the atmosphere shifting, the plan was finalized. The confrontation with Camilla wouldn't be a breakdown. It would be a strike. One meeting. One leaked phrase. One undeniable truth. Catherine hadn't stepped back, she had been pulled away. Carole would deliver that message not in rage, but in resolve. The palace had underestimated the mother. And now, they were about to feel her impact. But palace corridors are built on silence and retaliation, and Carole's move set off alarms deep inside royal strongholds. The monarchy doesn't bow to emotion, it neutralizes threats. And Carole Middleton's bold confrontation didn't end with a mic drop. It triggered a chain reaction from Camilla that could shatter both families. Within 24 hours of the Clarence House confrontation, the royal machine shifted gears behind closed doors. Emergency advisory meetings were quietly scheduled at Sandringham and Windsor, involving senior aides, private secretaries, and trusted strategists. The tone was sharp. The mission was clear: control the narrative, protect the crown, and extinguish the fire lit by Carole Middleton before it could become an inferno. Camilla, still reeling from the face-to-face reckoning, did not retreat. She retaliated. Not with public outrage, but with precision. Leaked reports began circulating in favored media circles, questioning the appropriateness of Carole's influence over royal affairs. Headlines emerged suggesting the Middleton matriarch had overstepped, that she was meddling in matters beyond her remit, and even implying that her boldness bordered on political opportunism. These weren't clumsy smears. They were calculated whispers, carefully framed to paint Carole not as a grieving mother, but as an ambitious outsider threatening palace unity. Commentators suddenly resurfaced archived footage, reanalyzing past Middleton moments with a suspicious lens. One headline read, "The Queen's Mother-in-Law, Supportive or Strategic?" Another asked bluntly, "Is Carole trying to run the royal family?" Behind the scenes, sources whispered of deeper retaliation. There were unconfirmed reports that members of the Middleton family had their security credentials reviewed, a subtle tightening of access. Nothing publicly stated but clearly felt. It was a message, unspoken but undeniable: step out of line, and the system will remind you who holds the power. Caught in the middle of the storm was William. The future king now found himself torn in three directions: between the mother of his children, the woman who raised her, and the institution that would one day crown him. He couldn't publicly support Carole's move without igniting a constitutional scandal. And yet, to rebuke her would be to turn his back on the very person who had held Catherine up during the darkest hours. Those closest to William said he became withdrawn, canceling engagements and refusing briefing calls. His public face remained composed, but behind palace walls, he was reportedly furious. Not at Carole. At the institution that had driven them all to this edge. And at the center of it all, Catherine remained silent. Not a statement. Not a quote. Not even a whisper. Her absence grew heavier by the hour, her voice replaced by speculation. Every time a palace car moved, tabloids swarmed, hoping for a glimpse. But there was nothing. And somehow, that silence spoke louder than any royal decree. It was not just absence, it was protest. And as the media storm raged, the public turned not toward the throne, but toward a voice they hadn't heard yet. After weeks of silence, Catherine finally speaks, not through a press release, not through a spokesperson, but in her own words. And what she says doesn't just shift the narrative, it redefines royalty. The message arrived in the early hours of a quiet morning, posted discreetly to a private online platform often used to share family updates with close friends. But this time, it was different. The account had no media ties, no royal branding, and no PR watermark. And yet, it carried the voice the world had been waiting for. A single paragraph, signed simply, Catherine. Its tone was composed but unmistakably personal. I have always served, but I am also someone's daughter, it began. With that opening line, the air around Buckingham Palace seemed to change. It was not an official statement, nor a sanctioned palace document. It was a confession. And it cut deeper than any headline. What followed was a quiet unraveling of years of restraint. Catherine didn't name names. She didn't need to. She wrote of duty, of silence, of the emotional toll of being expected to carry an image without support. She acknowledged the expectations, but beneath that acknowledgement was a deep and aching fatigue. I am not in competition, I am in survival, she wrote. That line alone was enough to trigger a flood of emotional reactions across social platforms. Within minutes, the phrase was trending globally. Within hours, the hashtag Queen in all but name had reached over 10 million mentions. Royal experts were stunned. Not just by the message, but by the fact that it hadn't come through the institution at all. Catherine had bypassed the palace. She had reclaimed her voice. The letter never once pleaded. It simply revealed. There was a sense of finality to it, as if she had nothing left to prove. I believe in the strength of this family, even when I've felt left behind by it, she wrote. And I believe in the people who have carried me when I could no longer stand alone. Her words spoke to every woman who had ever been expected to smile through pain, to hold herself together for the sake of others while being quietly erased in the process. It was not just a statement, it was an anthem. The reaction from the palace was immediate and silent. For the first time since the Middleton Camilla confrontation, the communications office paused all press briefings. Scheduled appearances were postponed, and palace officials refused to comment on the letter. Insiders reported a media blackout had been enacted while senior royals convened in a closed-door emergency meeting. Catherine's words had not just touched the public, they had rattled the crown. Support poured in from all sides: journalists, celebrities, politicians, and most notably, women who had once stood quietly in the background of their own lives. Carole Middleton, though not publicly quoted, was said to have smiled through tears upon reading it. She didn't need to say anything. Her daughter had spoken. And in doing so, she had turned the tide. But even as the public embraced her truth, questions remained: what would happen to Camilla, and how would the crown officially respond? For William, loyalty had always meant duty, but now duty meant choosing between the institution he would inherit and the family he risked losing. The next move was his, and it could fracture the monarchy forever. In the days following Catherine's letter, silence no longer offered safety. For William, it became a cage. He was surrounded by expectation, his father demanding steadiness, advisors insisting on unity, a public waiting for direction. But beneath the crown's weight, something in him had shifted. Catherine's absence was no longer symbolic, it was personal. His children had begun asking questions he couldn't answer. George had gone quiet. Charlotte had grown defensive. And Louis, once carefree, had become attached to routines that centered around memories of their mother. William saw it not just in them, but in himself. Every time he glanced at the seat beside him empty, deliberate, he was reminded that the woman he loved had been silenced, not by scandal, but by neglect. Pressure mounted from both ends. Charles, now visibly more reliant on Camilla, called for a firm and united front. Behind closed doors, he reminded William of what lay ahead: statesmanship, succession, centuries of tradition. But the argument no longer held its usual power. William had seen the personal cost. Catherine's withdrawal wasn't a phase, it was a scar. And for the first time, William questioned whether preserving the system was worth breaking the very people it was meant to protect. Then came the leak. A private phone call between William and Carole surfaced in the media, an emotional, low-toned exchange, not meant for headlines. But the words were there, clear and raw. "She shouldn't have had to fight alone," William said. "Not in this house. Not with this family." Though the palace refused to confirm or deny its authenticity, the damage was done. The world heard what the institution refused to acknowledge. William was no longer shielding the crown from criticism. He was acknowledging its failure. And in doing so, he turned a quiet civil war into a public reckoning. Rumors erupted that William was drafting a statement, not in defense of the monarchy but in defense of his wife. A statement focused on the family, on healing, on truth. Advisors were reportedly horrified. One insider claimed Charles was blindsided and betrayed when William declined to attend a scheduled private dinner meant to reunify the image of the royal household. But William didn't attend. He didn't call. And within the palace, the heir to the throne had never felt more distant. The moment was no longer about conflict, it was about consequence. William was no longer just the future king. He was a father, a husband, and a man standing at the crossroads of legacy and love. What he chose next wouldn't just define his reign. It would define what the monarchy would become, or cease to be. And then, the crown made a move no one expected: an olive branch wrapped in protocol, but delivered too late. Behind closed doors, Queen Camilla extended an offer, a gesture meant to restore harmony, or perhaps to restore control. But the world had already chosen. And for the first time in modern royal history, the crown followed the people. The pressure had become unmanageable. The royal institution, once an unshakable fortress, was now cracking under the weight of public sentiment. Catherine's silence had spoken louder than any official address, and William's quiet defiance had thrown protocol into disarray. The media frenzy, the emotional pleas from citizens, the resurgence of anti-monarchist sentiment, all of it had reached the threshold. Camilla, ever pragmatic, understood that regaining control required more than silence. It required an appearance of unity. And so, a private offer was extended to Catherine, a shared ceremonial role, a royal reappearance framed as reconciliation, and the promise of renewed visibility within the firm. But the gesture, however carefully wrapped, carried a familiar undertone: the expectation that Catherine would smile, stand still, and accept. What followed was not a public outburst or a palace leak. It was a single, quiet reply rumored to have been delivered in person through a trusted aide. Catherine's words were brief, but their impact was seismic. Dignity doesn't need a title. She had no interest in reclaiming what she never truly lost. Because the public had already crowned her in their hearts, not for protocol, but for perseverance. And this time, the crown had no power to overrule sentiment. William, watching the final act of this unfolding storm, issued a statement within 24 hours. It was simple, deliberate, and directed not at the palace, but at the people. He affirmed his unwavering support for his wife's choices, praised her strength, and reminded the nation that the future of the monarchy was not built on structure, but on service and soul. It was the most personal he had ever been in an official capacity, and it marked the beginning of something the firm had long feared: transparency. The impact was immediate. Parliament members began discussing what had previously been considered untouchable: the modern relevance of royal succession. Was it time to reevaluate ceremonial roles? Should symbolic positions evolve with the public will? Polls surged in favor of reform, with nearly 2/3 of respondents expressing support for Catherine's vision of monarchy, less about hierarchy, more about humanity. Editorials began calling her the people's pivot, and globally her name trended not because of a crown, but because of what she had endured without one. Camilla, for all her strategy, found herself standing on the wrong side of history. Her offer, though carefully timed, was seen not as a peace offering but as damage control. And while she continued to fulfill her duties, her image as a commanding force had been eclipsed by a woman who said nothing, yet moved everything. In the final act of this chapter, one scene emerged as a symbol. Carole Middleton was seen leaving Clarence's house one last time. No statements. No camera-facing smiles. Just a quiet, steady walk through the gates with her head held high. She had done what no press team, no advisor, no throne could. She reminded the world who Catherine truly was. Because in the end, it wasn't a title or a crown that defined Britain's queen, it was a mother's voice that reminded the world who truly led with grace. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.